Start you off.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm not going to take another silent reflection beginning of the meeting, but I'm afraid I do actually have to go through the same introduction because there's a separate recording of this which will be publicly available. So good morning. My name is Roger Boone. I'm the chair of SACRE. Can I welcome everyone to today's meeting, which is a hybrid meeting, particularly those of you who've joined subsequently to the agreed syllabus meeting. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded and will be available for viewing after the meeting. Should the live streaming fail, the meeting will continue and the recording will be available through the Council's website following the conclusion of the meeting. Can I remind members that translation facilities are available and for those attending on Zoom to choose your language of choice. For those wishing to speak in the chamber, please raise your hand. And for those on Zoom, please use the raised hand function. We will alternate between speakers in the chamber and on Zoom. For those attending remotely, please note that those in the chamber will be unable to use the chat facility. If possible, Zoom attendees are required to leave their camera on at all times. Have we any apologies for absence, Sally?
Yeah, apologies have been received from teacher representatives Arian Pierce and Carl Lawson, the Humanist representative Susie Sturley, and also Dr. Lowry Brown, Head of Education Services.
We've not heard from our Vice Chair, Julie Fallon. Yes, key member, Frank. She's the also Cabinet Member for Education. Yeah. Yeah. Any declarations of interest, anybody? Okay, I have no urgent matters. So you've received copies of the minutes. I'd like them to be approved and signed as a correct record. Could I have a proposal for that, please, particularly if you were at the last meeting? Thank you, Colette. Could I have a seconder, please? Please. Thanks, you. Okay, so no amendments. Those in favour, we'll take teachers first, please. Thank you, Hayley. Okay, faith reps, council reps. Okay, that's unanimous. Okay, we come to matters arising. Vacancies. I just want to note that, first of all, that we do have a secondary representative, Carl Lawson, who is actually not very well today and unable to attend. And Carl's is a fine teacher. I know him personally very well. He's got a very good grasp of this particular area of the curriculum. But, and I want to register this, I am disappointed that the head teachers group has not been able to nominate a head teacher to succeed Ian Gerard on this particular group, because Carl will not be able to take what we discuss and decide on the issues from this group back to the heads group. So that's a broken line of communication. And I would like that noted, and I'd like the Director of Education to note it as well, please. Right, the other vacancies, I'm in discussions with the Union of Welsh Independents at the moment for that vacancy to be filled. I'm hoping that one particular person is going to pick up on that. I've also been invited to speak to the United Reform and the English Presbyterian at one of their meetings in August, and hopefully out of that will become a representative for them. It's been raised with the Methodists, but there's nobody coming forward at the moment. Okay, anything else on vacancies?
Yes, I'm meeting with the education improvement team on Monday. I can bring up the conversation around the head teacher representation, and then also special school vacancies. There is a class teacher that's coming into the local authority from Denbighshire that I know of. She's very, very good, so I will approach. But I'll mention that to the education improvement team as well to see if they've got anybody that they want to put forward. And we have a primary head teacher position as well. So I'll bring that in conversation in my meeting on Monday with the education improvement team.
Okay, thanks. The next matter arising is the data in relation to representation on SACRE. In other words, how do you determine whether a particular group within a community actually is large enough to be represented on this particular group? And Tanya was going to do some research on that. She's at a national meeting, I think, today. Yes. So she's not able to be with us. So Sally, if we could defer that, please, to the next agenda, which brings us to item 6, the adoption of the agreed syllabus conference recommendations. That has had to go as a process through to council. And so perhaps, Phil, you could actually share that process because you were fundamentally part of it and had to give a presentation, or were supposed to give a presentation.
The process that we went through, I had to create a report for Cabinet. That report starts on page, or it's agenda item 6 in the minutes, in the agenda pack, sorry, starting from page 12. That was quite a lengthy process. So Julie Fallon seconded that proposal and she took it through Cabinet. I had to create the report that you see there, as well as a equalities impact assessment to look at how an agreed syllabus adoption would impact on things, on the protected characteristics of the population of Conwy. That went through then Cabinet very successfully. Julie presented the report and the Cabinet just agreed that the agreed syllabus or the guidance would be accepted as our agreed syllabus. So then it can now continue through to ensure that the process and the agreed syllabus is put up on the relevant websites, etc. That's about it, really. There were no questions on Cabinet. It just went through, and so hopefully, yeah, it's now gone through the legal process to be adopted as an agreed syllabus.
I personally, as chair, I'm really keen that the Cabinet and the council have an awareness of actually what's being done through this particular group. And Phil, you prepared a presentation, but you didn't give that presentation, did you?
So I was asked by the director to be there in case there are any questions that Julie needed some support on. I presume that's standard practice in terms of Cabinet presentations. So I was there just in case Julie wasn't able, but it was Julie's report to bring, I think, and it was Julie's recommendation for Cabinet. So I was there as professional support, I think.
Yeah. Well, Phil, you saw that very full and complex equalities impact assessment that was actually produced by Phil, which actually wasn't discussed at all. It was just passed through on the nod. And I wanted to ask Julie the question, really. If this is so important, why wasn't it discussed? I mean, there's all that body of work saying this is a fundamentally important platform of policy within the authority. Why didn't they look at the agreed syllabus in that particular context? And the further question to that would be the issue of racism and prejudice, which is implicit in that. Yeah, and also, in fact, has a place within our curriculum. Why hasn't the authority decided that it's going to address that issue and making an input into curriculum development of the new curriculum in this particular area? And I am aware that that is taking place in a number of boroughs, counties, in the south of Wales. It's not being discussed here. Now, I know we don't have such a pluralistic sort of community here, but we are preparing children for the wider world. So I'd be very grateful, maybe if council members, somebody could take this question back. I don't really want to respond.
Well, I don't. Website. and any relevant point I'm making was never mentioned diversity there. That's a big subject. Methodist, I am a Methodist, and maybe there's no Methodist here because the Reverend man from the last service is next Sunday, and then you have a new minister coming in August, and a young man, family man, his children are going to school, so I would presume that he wanted to approach, and I will approach it, but I will allow you to write to him, Chair. And council members are very committed. I mean, Councillor Andrew, you've already heard, she's expressed her eagerness to involve herself in this committee. And I could speak for Sharon, although Sharon could speak for herself. Another very committed female, as you find females, if they go for a thing, they are extremely professional and extremely committed. And I'm sure the Zoom members of Haley and Colette are the same. No, I think you have the basis of the committee for what I've seen as a councillor to move forward in unison and achieve what you would like to achieve and get rid of the vacancy, because I think that's the first priority.
Thank you for that, Frank. I think we could raise that as an issue, couldn't we, with the improvement team as well, couldn't we? That's the obvious place. And then,
Yes.
Yeah. So we could do that, Phil, to raise that as an issue with the improvement team. Okay, so we move on to the creation of the teacher network, which is absolutely key. I would, however, as an introduction to that, I'd like to raise my concern about really the whole issue of preparing our teachers for the introduction of the new curriculum. And I'm raising that because I was really very surprised. I attended the WASACA meeting only yesterday, and I was very surprised to see just how much commitment was being made by some of the southern counties to actually thoroughly and strategically preparing teachers in our schools with regard to the introduction of OVE into the curriculum. And I'll quote Swansea. Swansea, in fact, actually had 4 sessions introducing OVE. It was cross-phase, and they had nearly 100 teachers attending that particular meeting. It's just, we've never had that kind of attendance, I think, at a training meeting in our authority. They also have set up the network that we're trying to set up today through using Microsoft Teams, and they've got 15 to 20 members regularly attending that. Key to it, from my perspective as well, is that all head teachers and senior leaders, both in the primary and the secondary sector, have been provided with professional learning with regards to OVE in the new curriculum. So they know that's a responsibility for their school now, and they know what they're actually going to implement, and it's them, they have a responsibility for that to their governing bodies. Also, interestingly enough, there's a termly meeting by the Director of Education for members of faith communities. So there's that liaison taking place with the wider community, which is very much in the spirit, I think, of this new curriculum as well. I thought what was interesting as well, that, and this all requires manpower, you realise that, they were able to do a teacher audit on the agreed syllabus. So to find out within all the schools how aware they were of the existence of the agreed syllabus, because they now have to give regard to it. There was an agreed syllabus before, but they particularly now legally have to have regard it because it's a mandatory part of the curriculum. We don't have that kind of knowledge at all in our schools. And they were also doing something which I know Larry's keen about, which is actually establishing a pupil voice, a learner voice in the whole process. So it seems to me that strategically, they had looked at where the potential deficits were. Another area that cropped up as well was that, of course, you now have OVE being put into the whole area of humanities. And normally, therefore, the person in charge of humanities, particularly I'm thinking secondary schools now, would have an overview, an over-responsibility OVE, but they may have previously had no experience whatsoever of teaching OVE, but it would now be their professional responsibility within the schools. And it seems to me that, and also the meeting yesterday, that there was a gap here that in terms of training that needed to be filled, where there was a deficit there, that training could be actually made available to facilitate the introduction of OVE. So a number of issues there, and also the question, I think Frank was asking about quality assurance earlier, the last meeting, and each school will design its own curriculum. So how do we monitor and design the design of individual schools? How do you do that? Frank, you asked the question about ESTIN. Well, if ESTIN are going to go through all the schools, it could be 10 years before they get to an individual school, you know? So it doesn't give you any real, they're not going to be able to give us any real feedback on what's happening during the process of introduction. It was recommended yesterday by, I can't remember who it was, contributors, said that it would be a good idea for the head teacher to report to the governing body on the introduction and place of OBE in the curriculum, and to do that annually as each stage was, you know, introduced into the school. So that was a suggestion there that came out of that meeting. But what I'm really saying is, in terms of this whole area of training, I do actually think there needs to be a more strategic look by the authority at the whole area. Before I move on to the second part of this, which is the individual part of the creation of the teacher network, any questions on what?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, in this modern age of electronics, ESTIN can send an email out, a text to every school, pressing a button and get what they're doing for the education of the religious education in that particular school. That's a simple question. What are you doing? And you'll get a tick box answer. We're following the advice of such and such, but that gets a dialogue going, and then you add the supplementary question to that. There's many ways to skin the orange.
And you don't need an inspection for that, of course, as well. That's a really interesting suggestion, Frank. Thanks for that. We'll carry that forward to another forum. Thank you, indeed.
Ga I ddod I mewn yma, Phil, os gwelwch yn dda? Dwi'n meddwl bod yn, bod fi'n cytuno a beth chi wedi dweud efo hyfforddi a'r patrwm ac yn y blaen, ond rhaid ni beidio bod yn rhy galed ar ysgolion chwaith, achos dyma beth sy'n digwydd mewn ysgolion rwan. A mae yna dipyn bach o gymysgedd, fatha fysa'r maes llafur cytunedig yma'n sefyll ar ben ei hun. Dwi'n siŵr sa Hayley, enghraifft, yn dweud, yna lawer iawn o gwaith sydd wedi mynd I mewn i'r maes llafur a wybodaeth yn digwydd yn barod mewn ysgolion. Enghraifft, gwaith y cyngor ysgolion efo plant, cyngor eco ysgolion, gwaith cymunedol, gyrfaoedd, mae'r cwbl yn ffitio I mewn yn y pen draw. A tydi'r dyniaethau yma ddim yn sefyll ar ben ei hun. Mae o sefyll o fewn rhwydwaith llawer iawn ehangach o fewn ysgolion felly. A dwi'n siŵr y bydd ysgolion rwan yn edrych ar fapio y cyfan o'r profiadau sy'n digwydd. Nes I holi'r un cwestiwn yma mewn rhyw gyfarfod yn ddiweddar yma, a mi oedd y person yn gyfrifol mewn ysgol yn dweud bod yn sicr y bysa nhw yn mynd I tracio hwn yn iawn. A da ni rwan ddim yn tracio fatha oedd Estyn yn wneud o ran gwybodaeth, ond da ni'n tracio datblygiad disgyblion unigol rwan, sy'n mae disgyblion yn dod yn ei blaenau. Todd Estyn ddim yn gwneud hynny, todd ysgolion ddim yn gwneud hynny chwaith, achos oedd y cwbl o'r blaen wedi bod yn ddibynnol ar ganlyniadau, arholiad ac yn y blaen. Felly, mae rhaid ni edrych ar hwn fel o ffitio I mewn I batrwm eang o fewn ysgol a'r holl brofiadau mae ysgol yn gallu rhoi iddyn nhw. Yr unig beth sydd yn dal yn broblem wrth gwrs ydy pob ysgol yn gallu bod rhyw fath a ysgol Glangele, enghraifft, yn gwneud hyn. Ond os na, dwi'n meddwl dyna pam dwi'n pwysleisio bod angen y rhwydwaith yma fod yn gadarn felly yn fyma. Dwi'n meddwl bod Estyn yn gwybod be maen nhw fod i wneud eto, a dweud y gwir, ynde? Achos y syniad sydd gen i nad i Estyn ddim yn dall beth sy'n digwydd mewn ysgolion ar hyn o bryd. Ac ella fel sy'n digwydd yn y Ffindir, be fi'n digwydd efo ymweliadau Estyn ydy ymweliadau thematig fyddan nhw'n edrych ar addysg yn fwy cyffredinol ac yn bynciol o hyn ymlaen. Felly, a fi hynny llawer iawn mwy caredig i athrawon yn nhw sy'n adnabod i disgyblion a datblygiad i disgyblion. Mae ddrwg i ni Phil Roger am bregethu yn fanna, ond dwi'n meddwl bod rhaid ni weld mwy ochr athrawon a phrif athrawon yn y pwyllgor yma na rwy'n wrtha fi efallai sydd yn gam oddi wrth hynny. Ond mi ydyn ni yn Ysgol Dyffryn Conwy ar hyn o bryd yn cychwyn ar y cwricwlwm yma. A da ni wedi bod yn trafod fel llywodraethwyr ers cryn amser hwn a wedi cael cyflwyniadau sydd mae pethau'n gweithio ac yn mhob cyfarfod llywodraethwyr erbyn hyn, da ni sôn am y cwricwlwm newydd a'r datblygiadau o fewn yr ysgol, a da ni hefyd yn strwythuro yn staffio ar gyfer hyn hefyd. A dwi'n siŵr bod llawer iawn o ysgolion eraill yn gwneud hynny. Ond tos a ddim rhannu y profiadau yma ar draws, bod ni wedi ddod â hwn i fyny yn cyfarfod llywodraethwyr Conwy eto, bydd yn cyfarfod ar ddechrau Hydref erbyn hyn, a fydden ni'n cael adroddiad gan Conwy ar hynny. Diolch am y cyfle i ddweud yn wneud, Roger, yn fanna.
Okay, before Colette comes in, can I just respond to that as well? The desire, my particular desire, is that there should be appropriate support for teachers. And, you know, some schools are going to be excellent exemplars in terms of the introduction of the curriculum. Some because they're very, very keen on this, others because they have a good deal of experience. But we do have a lack of specialists also in the authority. And it's important, therefore, that we make sure that we actually have a proper framework which is accessed by all the teachers so they receive the support as appropriate. I take the point as well about the pressures that teachers are under as well. It's been a very, very difficult time, the implementation of the national curriculum at the moment. I spoke to a junior school teacher about 4 or 5 weeks ago, asked her how she was actually doing. She said, it's tough. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, I had 75 in my class yesterday, which horrified me, but it was all to do with the impact of COVID on staffing and so forth. So we are making big demands, but that's all the more reason for actually ensuring that the levels of support are actually as great as the authority can give them. Colette.
Yeah, can I just add just 2 things that I think, you know, we really need to have perhaps a little bit more confidence in the staff in our schools. I think, you know, I appreciate that we're obviously to make sure that RVE is delivered in our schools, but I think we need to put that into the context of the new curriculum. And I really don't think that our schools will see it as something that they can leave out. I think it's going to be absolutely, you know, intrinsic in the whole planning, and they are working through that planning of the new curriculum. So I do think perhaps that we shouldn't be too pessimistic about it. I think it really is up there and it is happening. And my second point is we can look at other authorities and think that they are doing more than us, but having got the opportunity to meet with other SACRA members in other authorities in Wales, but also in England, I think in Conwy we need to be extremely grateful to Phil and realise how lucky we are in having such an excellent consultant to our SACRA, and that the work that he's doing with the schools, I think probably, you know, goes way and above beyond what's happening in other authorities.
Well, with regard to the last bit, obviously, you know, the schools, obviously, I had no conception that they would be leaving this out. It was just a matter of giving them the appropriate professional support where it was needed. And in fact, the whole business of sharing expertise, and we were talking, if Laurie had been here, we were going to look at the possibility, I think, Phil, of actually using the local clusters. Hayley's already shared just how valuable it would be to share expertise and build and with practice amongst fellow schools in similar sectors. And that's what we'll come on to on this particular item. With regards to Phil, it's been great to have Phil back as a consultant. It'd be wonderful to have him back as full time. But as we all know, Phil has actually gone off to run his own business and so forth. And if you look at this the paper he's actually clipped to this particular item, which we'll look at now, it does mean that he's not able to do as much as he would like to do. I think that's fair to say, isn't it, Phil? So I'll leave you to introduce this now.
Yeah, I think so. It's a mixed economy, isn't it, across the local authorities? Some local authorities like Swansea have employed somebody 2 days a week to do RVE and RSE, so that's a big sort of job. But they've got school responsibility for the remainder of the 3 days a week. So in terms of juggling, that there's a lot going on there, and they've also using a partnership between 3 local authorities that are working on equality, diversity, BAME, etc. So they're drawing on quite a broad pool of experience that I don't think we have in the north. And I suppose the question is, how do we engineer that? That's one question. How do we sort of create that support, number one, but also with what we've got, how do we make the most of the opportunities? So there's 2 things going on. Now, in terms of the management plan, it was proposed that we had a teacher network that was able to facilitate a lot of the supporting of teachers. So I pick up what Hayley said in terms of being able to share expertise and providing a space for that to happen. Now, due to sort of, I suppose, capacity, I've not been able to provide the opportunities and I would love to create these opportunities, but when you're working 4 days with Ware and sort of doing a few days for Conwy, it becomes quite difficult. So one of the things that's working really successfully in Conwy, I think, from discussions with the EI team, is the way that I forgot what they're called, cluster groups, sorry, the way that the clusters work. And so actually there are cluster representatives that sit on various bodies, and that feeds information from the local authority to the cluster and from the cluster back through to whoever needs that information. So I've proposed on this piece of paper, on this report here, that it's a teacher-led, sorry, I see the microphone just going on, that the network is a teacher-led network, one in which the teacher network itself can create the agenda, that can sort of create the conversation and agree what's needed. And then I can attend those meetings to bring some professional support. Now, the way that Gware has created the local AOLE networks, that's been very successful. Now, some are more successful than others, but the ones that have been very successful, it's the teachers that are sort of with their ears close to the ground, that are in conversation with other teachers on a regular basis, saying, we need to support this, we need to do that, this is where our group's going to go. And I'll give you an example. The humanities group in Flintshire, they recently arranged a field trip day. So they met at Flint Castle, then they went down to the lifeboat station, they went to Talacra Beach, and they went somewhere else. And then they met together to discuss how they could use those points of interest within their humanities curriculum. That was teacher-led, it was teacher-agreed, and then that was very, very successful. Now, I think something that's more teacher-led could be a little bit more fluid around that, to say, actually, let's have a meeting down at, I don't know, Conwy Castle. How can we make the most of Conwy Castle as an RVE resource or as a humanities resource? So I think one thing that I'm suggesting here, and that in my conversations with the education improvement team, and I've already sort of had a discussion with them that if we can use the cluster model that is successful within Conwy and actually use something around that to be able to feed them with some information and then feed it back, and then I will be able to provide some professional support, and that's what I am doing for this committee, and I'll be able to do for that that group as well. It'll be a lot more collaborative rather than the local authority designated group to which people can attend or not attend. It will be a teacher group to which teachers will feel that they will get something from and hopefully have a lot more ownership. So that's what's being proposed, and that's what I suggest that we take to the local authority. It will be then funded by the local authority. They've agreed for 10 teachers for half a day per term to attend those meetings. That will be supply cover that's already been agreed. So there's a considerable amount of money coming from the local authority to fund that group. The accountability outside of COVID may be a question that could be discussed about attendance, who attends those meetings, and actually if they don't attend those meetings, where does the money go? Does the money get clawed back? Things like that can be discussed at a later date. But at the moment, I think the formation of a teacher network would benefit from the cluster model that's already working within the authority. I mean, I don't, Hayley's experience will be one of many teachers' experience around the clusters. I don't know if there's anything to mention, Hayley, about how your cluster is working, or whether that would be something that you think would work. I don't know if you want to comment at all.
I think it's a great idea, Phil, is meeting with these other teachers. I think the issue is currently is making these teachers aware, and who will these teachers be? Will they have experience in humanities and RVE? And is it down to the heads to nominate the teachers maybe?
Yeah, I was thinking that, because actually maybe a terms of reference then for the person who's taking on that responsibility to feed information forward to groups like ourselves, but also to feed the cluster as a result of what's being made available from that group, the training. Like you say, if we can make your presentation today available to teachers, but then also that other teachers would make their planning available as well. So there is I think I wrote it down as a lenses vault. If there's somewhere that people can draw on to see people already planning and what that might look like.
I think that's certainly a starting point. If we can share, that's what we've been doing in the cluster groups. I've been part of the expressive arts one as well, and just sharing examples of the planning and things has been useful.
Colette?
Hi, sorry again. Can I just ask Phil what the situation is with funding from Welsh Government? Because do I remember rightly at the start of this, when the RVE guidance was first produced, there was talk of funding from Welsh Government for training?
And that's to do with the professional learning offer that was mentioned yesterday in WASACRE. I'm coming, that will be mentioned a little bit later. I could mention that now.
Yeah, deal with it.
Okay. So Welsh Government, with collaboration from WASACRE, I think it was WASACRE that commissioned Welsh Government to provide these resources, or vice versa. They've created 10, and they call them playlists. And a playlist is basically a training module on Hub. They will be available for anybody on Hub. And there are 5 modules to do with what's new for various stakeholders, including head teachers, primary, secondary heads, PRU and special educational establishment, what's new for them. And then later on, there will be religion, values and ethics in relation to literacy and numeracy and ICT, and then also in terms of progression assessment and pedagogy. So there are 10 modules that are being released. They were supposed to be released in April. It's been deferred. They were going to be then sort of put back to now. But we heard yesterday that Welsh Government are committed to release them, 5 of them at the beginning of September, and then the rest will roll out in the autumn term. But that's where the money's gone for professional learning. It's gone into those modules.
Thank you. I was just wondering whether there was anything for individual authorities as well as that. I was being hopeful, I suppose.
Yeah, Phil, supplementary to that, it seems to me that some of the examination, that GWARE was actually, well, somebody was providing funding from the examination boards. What about GWARE as a source of funding?
So GWARE have provided funding for schools for training on the new curriculum. That funding went in as a result. Hayley's just mentioned that she's on the Expressive Arts local group. Schools are receiving, I think it's £2,000 if they are on a local network, and those local networks are divided into 6. So there's 6 AOLEs. I think there's one on curriculum design and one on assessment as well. So there are these 8 groups locally that schools can attend and be part of, but there is a give and take, like Hayley said, there's a give and take responsibility on those groups. That's where the funding's gone from GWARE. So Welsh Government have funded GWARE to fund training, but the training has gone, it's completely gone on that, on those local networks. Again, in the south, they've done it slightly differently. I did a presentation to CYSAG 2 in the spring, and I said that ours is a bottom-up funding model where teachers are working together, very much like this cluster model we're discussing here for SACRE support. And I think that's very, very successful in supporting teachers to be aware of the curriculum. I think in the south, it's a little bit more local authorities or regional consortia providing training on specifics. I think our teachers will be stronger in their understanding of the curriculum as a result of the way that GWARE's done it. I think that's sort of my opinion. But I think that teachers in the north will be more aware of the structure and the way things are going. Hugh's got his hand up.
Hugh.
You're on mute, Hugh.
I know that cluster groups have been, for Welsh and RE and so on, and they work particularly well. The question I have here is regarding resources and bilingual resources as well, because each cluster group maybe will have different resources. And the time, in creating resources, even for a cluster group, is quite a task, really. Would there be any help for, bilingual resources and so on? I've read through the notes that we have for this meeting, and the question does arise somewhere at the end there. But is there, Phil, any consideration of bilingual resources and materials for teachers? Maybe it is more easier through the English language because there's so much stuff available, but there may be a different aspect and we need to be concerned about in some more bilingual cluster groups and so on. And even in, with the new Welsh WESP structure in Conwy, that we need to be aware of that as well.
Yeah, that's a valid question. I think the cluster model will be that there is a representative on a teacher network from the clusters, rather than each cluster having its own RVE working group. That may or may not happen, but I'm not sure. I think what we're proposing here is one group for Conwy across the clusters. Anything that we create, I'm pretty sure that the EIT team will ensure that it's translated and made available bilingually. I can't see that being a problem. And actually having a place to have a conversation around the curriculum, as Hayley said, is probably the most important place, and then from that resources can be created and then they can be translated as necessary. And if there are any good practices, if there are any schools that say, look, we'd like to see that on a website or on a Teams network, I'm sure we can get those translated as well. So it's not just collaborative materials from the group, but actually good materials that schools have created, whether that they've created that in English or whether they've created that in Welsh can be translated either into English or into Welsh for the whole of the network. And then how we make that available, I know that teachers have worked on Spark websites and all sorts of things. So how we make that available will be down to the teacher network team.
Am I right in thinking, Colette and Phil, that something about Welsh resources was mentioned at Wasaco yesterday?
Yes, I think it was, but I can't remember what they said, if I'm honest.
But there was some kind of commitment to providing more resources in Welsh, wasn't there? But I'm not sure about the details. But certainly, Hugh, that's certainly being talked about at a national level. There's a recognition that there's a deficit in that area. So we're looking, thanks for that contribution from both of you. We're looking for a proposal here now. We'd like really, it's about an issue about recruitment, isn't it? And how we best pursue recruitment for the group with the support of the authority. The whole issue of terms of reference for the group has actually been raised as well. And I'm just wondering the best route to go down with regard to this. Is this a meeting with Lowry? She's not here today. A meeting with Lowry and the EIT. There might be funding implications, which means it would go farther potentially, but is that the first stage?
Yes, I'm meeting with the EIT on Monday. We've discussed these proposals already, and they're quite favourable. That it's something that they would. I think it's something that they've already got a network that we can tap into rather than creating something new. But I'm taking on Hayley's point on how do we ensure. I think in terms of reference and the selection of the right person per cluster is an essential part of that. Yeah. And maybe whether there's a key person like a deputy and, you know what I mean, whether there's two people. So if one person can't attend the meeting, there's still representation from the cluster. I think things like that need ironing out, and I can have that conversation with them on Monday.
Yeah, and in terms of time, this could be done on Teams quite easily, couldn't it? So that people didn't have to come out of school, and it'd be economical with the use of time as well. So there's a proposal there. It's under possible way forward on page 92 of your papers, right at the back. That Phil is making. I personally would want to endorse that. We take that forward to Lowry and the EIT group and ask for feedback on that. And also, given the impending introduction of the curriculum, that this is implemented as quickly as possible in terms of timescale. And we have to recognise Phil's particular position in the brilliant way he's actually kind of, you know, professionally advised us over the years, but he does have a multiple role now. And so it's very important that this group actually becomes a self-organizing group. He will be able to support it, but the group itself, the teachers, will do the organizing of it. Yeah, sure.
I think it's important to on that the possible way forward. I think the bottom one, the second last bullet point talks about maybe whoever chairs that meeting receives extra funding. So the model that Gwere is using at the moment, that the regional leads for that particular group get twice the funding, and then that covers an extra couple of days for correspondence, etc. And actually, it might be a good middle leadership, professional development opportunity for somebody within the cluster. So it might support that aspect as well as somebody who's keen. So the local authority seemed okay with that one, but I'll firm that up. But I just wanted to highlight that aspect, that whoever leads that will receive extra funding for the time that they need to take that job.
Okay, so in principle, we'd already agreed about the funding of a Conwy teacher network. That's part of the management plan. We've also agreed through the agreed syllabus as well that they would have a particular role, but here's a particular way of pursuing it now in our particular circumstances. So we have a proposal here about taking it forward, and I'd like someone to propose that, please. Thank you, Hugh. Could I have a second, please?
I'll second it, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much. Oops. Groups, okay, we'll take teachers first. Okay, and faith reps, council reps. So that's unanimous, okay. So hopefully, Phil, we can we can get that going as soon as possible so that we can get a meeting arranged appropriately. Yeah. Right. Okay. Let's move on then. Yours, Phil. School questionnaire on the agreed syllabus.
Okay, and this one continues to rattle on. We wanted to do a questionnaire for schools, but with the concerns around COVID, we didn't want to send it a questionnaire that would then be ignored due to sort of pressures in schools. So really the things to consider are the timing, the content, the audience, and the format. Working backwards, I think a Google form would work really well within schools, or a Microsoft form. They have an equivalent. The audience, we heard yesterday from Swansea SACRA that they've created a questionnaire for teachers. Now, what we could do is we could send out one questionnaire, and then it could be asked, who are you within the school? So are you a head teacher? Are you a teacher? What year would you be? And actually we can filter the results. So there's one questionnaire, but we can use the magic of Teams, the magic of Google, to be able to work out who's saying what. So what the head teachers say, what the sort of class teachers are saying, secondary and primary, for example. The content, I've been given a link to Swansea SACRA's questionnaire, and I'll just very quickly go through the questions that they posed. So they asked about, sort of, one was an email address so they could respond, the name of their school. They've asked a simple question: are you aware that there is a locally agreed syllabus for RE? So they've started with a very low baseline. They've then said that Swansea SACRA have the responsibility for putting together the locally agreed syllabus, and then they've asked what would they like to see in it. I think Swansea are in a different position to us. They've not adopted the guidance. We've adopted the guidance. I think these questions are irrelevant for us because of the way that we've adopted our agreed syllabus. It says the Welsh Government have renamed the subject RVE. Will this impact on your curriculum planning? And if so, how? It says the role of SACRA is to advise and support schools with RVE and collective worship. How can we support, this is a good question, how can we support this in your school setting? And then there is a catch-all. Is there any further information that you'd like to give Swansea SACRA? And there's an opportunity for people to give that. That's a questionnaire that they've given out. We wanted to ask questions more about their provision and about how they're getting on with that, and maybe areas that the teacher network can support, or maybe Conwy could flag up, or myself, we could do some training videos on. So I think there's some questions around where are they in terms of their planning for the RVE. I don't know. I like questions of on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you put yourself on that? Because actually it enables us to quite quickly gather some information about where our teachers are at, rather than wading through lots of information that's a narrative about, oh, we're doing this and we've done that and we don't like this and we do like that. So I think questions around on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you put yourself on, for example, planning with the new curriculum, or the concepts or the lenses or something like that, an understanding of the curriculum would be an appropriate way of asking those questions. The timing then, I think this is difficult, and I think from Swansea's point of view, they've just said, well, no time's a good time in the current climate. Maybe we just send it out. Maybe early on in the new term, thinking about where they are with the development of the curriculum that would be statutory in primary schools. With only sort of 3 weeks to go, would we get much of a response if we put the question out now? I doubt it. So we could work on that over the summer and then agree that and get it out sort of early September, or maybe after our SACRA meeting in the mid-October. So it's over to.
Yeah, I'll be interested, first of all, Hayley, as professional input though, what do you've heard a pretty detailed proposal there from Phil. Any thoughts?
Well, the idea of the questionnaire is great, but I appreciate what you've just said, Phil, regarding timing and getting it out now, and teachers' response. We're all a bit on burnout at the moment with the curriculum and implementing it. So I think teachers certainly need to get their head around it before answering the questions, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think definitely in the, you know, the new year, curriculum year, definitely.
Okay. So, yeah, go on.
Just another thought, if we used a baseline questionnaire, then if we were to ask a similar questionnaire at the end of the year or at the beginning of next year, we'd also get some good information about how SACRE or the teacher network or the stuff that we've provided, how that's actually impacted our teachers. Because if they're struggling and then they go through to being somewhat satisfied, we could probably hopefully say that's down to SACRE or the teacher network. So it might be worth baselining our own work with that questionnaire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hugh?
Yeah, can I ask, you might get different answers, or is there some sort of caveat or something in the wording for those schools that are secondary schools that have opted in, and those that have not started the national curriculum? Because the answers will be different, the experiences will be different on those as well, and we need to see what the good practice has been on those that have opted in the secondary sector.
Yeah, there's a different perspective there, isn't there, Phil? I mean, is there a case for actually doing two separate ones, one for primary and one for secondary?
I've just written that down, so that comes under the audience, and maybe we need a separate secondary and a separate primary questionnaire.
Okay, taking that on board as well. Larry was very keen to actually tap into the pupil voice, but this is probably too early for this at this stage, isn't it?
Yes, Swansea have used the RE Quality Mark questionnaire, and I've been going on this for a while. There is a really nice pupil questionnaire that's downloadable and you can use. It's in English and it's in Welsh, straight from the RE Quality Mark website. I'll hopefully put that on the next newsletter. But schools, and again from a baselining point of view, I would encourage schools to do that as soon as possible so they can implement and get an idea of how successful their changes are by doing the same questionnaire in a year's time and being able to compare the results.
So they do have to implement the curriculum in the first instance, don't they?
They do, yeah.
Get pupil feedback. Yeah, so in principle, that's a good thing to be doing, but maybe stage 2 of this?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So there's a proposal here. Do you want to make any comments on formats? We've just agreed that we do two separate one, but that's about audience.
What do people think of sort of on a scale of, you know, those using those sorts of questions with an opportunity to comment below, but it just means that we can capture a good percentage of people like teachers think. So I'd like to know what people think about using that phraseology.
Yeah, I support that particularly. Any views? Colette?
Yeah, that sounds good. Would it be an opportunity to ask about the need for resources and in which particular areas? Or would that be too much detail, Phil?
I think it would be good as well, picking up Hugh's point from earlier, that we actually also ask about Welsh resources in Welsh at the same time as well.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I think narrative, we can put as many narrative questions or responses in as possible. And that's fine because we can collate that data, especially on things like need for resources. But I think if we start with a question on a scale of do we need lots of resources for the new curriculum, then it gives us a good percentage for, if we are doing reports to Welsh Government or to WASACRE, we can say that 90% of our teachers, responded we can say that they really felt that they needed some resources for the new curriculum. You know what I mean? It's easier to do that and then have a narrative opportunity below to say, what would these resources look like, or what areas would we want us to develop?
Okay, so we have a proposal here that we take this, that Phil goes away and prepares this.
Just timing, when
Yeah.
would we do that?
For introduction to finalise this at the October meeting with the actually putting it out to the schools towards the end of term, given what Hayley was saying, the end of the autumn term. So that's the proposal, that's the timing. Would you be happy with that, Hayley?
Yeah, absolutely. Further to extra bits you were talking about, building a narrative on the questionnaire, I would imagine, you know, if we ask teachers what support do they need, I do anticipate them wanting sort of more training and things like that. Is that something that will appear on the questionnaire? Is it something that will be covered?
Yeah, that will really pick up some of the issues we were talking about previously as well.
Yeah.
So thanks for that, Hayley. Appreciate. Yeah, that's great. Okay, can I have a proposal that this is what we do then? Thanks, Colette. Seconded by Hugh. Teachers in favour? Faith representatives in favour? Councillors in favour? Unanimous. Okay, thanks for that, Phil. We look forward to getting that. As you'll be aware from the last meeting, that we have in train a summer newsletter, which I think has changed slightly since our first draft, which I think all of you got the first draft. Is that right, Phil? Yeah. So perhaps you could take us through that. Yeah.
You received the first draft yesterday, which was completed not long before you received it. There are lots of links within the newsletter to the previous newsletter and to other things that are available. So that first page is basically an overview of the new curriculum and the changes that I think in the last newsletter they were proposed changes, but now they are changes that will be implemented or are agreed in legislation. So it's written rather than this is going to happen, it's written as this is now statutory. So the first page just includes a link to the previous newsletter, and that's got, because what I was going to do was, do I need to sort of state why we're doing a newsletter again and what's the purpose of SACRE? But because that's on the previous newsletter, actually we're going to end up with a nice body of material over time that teachers and schools can go into when they're looking at what's the purpose of SACRE, what's the purpose of the newsletter, and it will just build and build and build. So I think making previous copies of the newsletter available and maybe suggesting what's in them will be useful for schools. The rest of that page then is the guidance and how Denbighshire and Conwy have adopted that guidance, and it will become an agreed syllabus. Again, there is a little bit of future tense in there because it needs to go up on our website. So that's not done at the moment, but it will be available. And I suggested that teachers go to the guidance if they're going to use the guidance for planning. Then on the reverse side, for those of you that had seen the previous newsletter, there were 3 items that hadn't changed, and I'd only included the Agorid, qualification on the top left-hand side. In conversation with Roger, and because the previous newsletters will always be made available and it will always be easily accessible from the newsletter, repeating it did seem pointless, although I thought it was relevant. So what I've done is I've included some different articles. So one's on the St Giles Centre. The St Giles Centre is an RE centre in Wrexham, paid for by the Wrexham diocese, by a parochial trust, but they work in collaboration with a local authority. They've got some absolutely fantastic material on the website. It's all available bilingually. It's written within the Welsh context. They've got some very highly experienced Welsh colleagues working in that centre, and so I would suggest that Conwy teachers can always go to St Giles' website to find out the latest information regarding RVE within Wales. So that's a real gem, I think, for our teachers. On the top right-hand side is a mention about the professional development hub playlists that we've already talked about. And unfortunately, they're not available. We would have wanted them to be available by now, but they're not. But it's just to inform teachers that they will be available early September. And then I was aware that in the last newsletter, we had something for foundation phase and we had something for Key Stage 2. So I've made teachers aware of a post-16 resource that's available, and it's available through the St Giles Centre. So the St Giles Centre and a group called the St Mary's Centre have collaborated to make these, and they're very, very good journals for A-level students around a range of religious issues.
And available both English and Welsh.
They're available in both English and Welsh. There's something like, I think it says there's 65 journal articles in these different issues going back, I think 2013 or 2012. They were published for the first time. I presume I'm going to have to declare an interest here because my name is an editor on the inside cover. I've never edited anything in the document. I'm there as, I suppose, a guest editor, and I'm hoping they will send me something one day and I will be able to have a look at it and comment on it. But my name is on the inside cover. But up to now, I've not really had much to do with it, but I feel I need to sort of come clean on that one. And then we said that we will have things that are more appropriate for our own SACRAs. So Denbighshire SACRA are looking for a couple of positions. And I said these are going to be teacher positions rather than generic counsellors or sort of faith and belief representatives, because our audience is the schools for the newsletter. So Conwy, I need to include that there's a primary head teacher as well position that we need to fill. And then at the bottom, there's reference to a couple of teacher networks that are available. And then if schools would like to provide us with materials going forward, that would be good. But I think future articles on this may be some good practice regarding planning what that might look like in an infant school or a key stage 2. Sorry, maybe the different progression steps within the new curriculum. And are there any questions about the newsletter?
Well, first of all, Phil, thanks for the enormous amounts of excellent work. I think this is a great document. It really is. I know if I was a teacher in schools, I find this particularly helpful. I'll pick up on the Agora section in the next item on the agenda. But Hayley, as a professional, how well do you think this excellent document will be used?
I really like it. Really accessible. It reaches out to teachers. You know, it's sharing relevant information. And I think this is what teachers are crying out for. Certainly, teachers that are leading, you know, RVE and humanities. I think this is a great resource for them.
Great. How's it going to be publicised, Phil?
It'll be sent out by the local authority, so the EI team will send this out to all of their schools. They've got a very good publication system from what I'm aware. I suppose the barrier will be how it gets through from the head teacher to the teachers. And I don't know quite how to address that one.
Perhaps you could raise it EIT on then.
Yes, yeah.
If you would, yeah.
I have one other question as well. I've just thought. It's called REACH because religious education, it's now going to be REVEACH, or I don't know. How do we get the change of name of subjects after I spent so much time trying to come up with a name for this newsletter? How do we make that appropriate, or do we just keep it? Because the name of the Welsh version is called Agored, interestingly. And the Agored is also the name of one of the articles in the newsletter, but I don't know how easy it would be to I don't think there are any words beginning with RVE that would then turn into something that we could use as a title for a letter. Do we just keep it as REACH for the time being because there's a legacy element to it, or do we try and rethink the name and try and be clever with RVE?
I'd keep it, Phil, personally. Lots of nods going on there. Colette?
Can I ask? Well, unless it's revelation, can I ask? You know, the audience. You said the teachers were an audience. Will we be able to receive REACH, you know, by email on its own or something, so that we can share it with as members of SACRA? And also, I'd like. Is it possible to, you know, we got SACRA. People ask, well, what is CYSAG in Welsh? I think it could be written in full, really, so that people will know exactly what it is.
Yeah, that's a great conversation. I will make the newsletter available, and I think we have had conversations in the past about representatives on this group making these available to as many people as they can. So please send minutes, agendas, reports to the groups that you are working with. I would appreciate that. And that includes this newsletter. So the newsletter will be made available electronically through the minutes and through our membership. And I would ask that you share those with as many people as you can. And actually, there are lots of councillors here that will be governors on schools. So actually, that's a really good opportunity to say to the teachers, have you seen the newsletter, our newsletter, a SACRE newsletter, and find out whether it's getting past the head teacher. I think that's a great question. And then
Phil, can I come in there, Phil? Secondary schools have nominated teachers allied to humanities or whatever, the subject itself. Could these be sent by email to maybe the clerk of governors or something like that, so that governors will get it straight off and be able to ask that question?
I mean, that would certainly prevent it hanging around in a head teacher's very cluttered in-tray.
Yeah.
So frequently can actually happen. And Hugh, you're members of the Governors Forum, aren't you?
Yes.
Maybe you could share.
We're going to ask for a time for our REV on the Governors Forum in October now.
So it's worth sharing there, I would have thought, would you say?
Yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks very much for that. Councillor Norman.
Just in response to the question raised by Phil about the name of, I used to work in the education department for Welsh Government. And one of the things we used to do was put lots of documents and online and printed and that sort of thing. And it's just my observation, but if you've started to develop a strong brand with a brand name, I personally think it would be a shame to change it, because it does confuse people, and with so many acronyms and so many different pieces of information that go out to teachers, head teachers. I think if you've developed a strong identity and a catchy title for your product, then it should remain. It's just my opinion.
Okay. So my question is, therefore, we're going to adopt this. Before we adopt it, do we need to change the name? Can you just, if you don't want it changing, yes, put your hand up. So, yeah, that's unanimous. Great. Okay, so we keep it as. So
do we need, Phil, do we need a sentence somewhere to bring the words religion, values and ethics into the form very, very early on? Because that does not come until later.
What I could do then is just underneath the reach where we've got Denbighshire and Conwy SACRE newsletter, there could be something around RVE, religion, values and ethics in there. So a descriptor. Yeah, I can do that quite easily.
Yeah, that way we'll keep the brand going, but we'll be up to date as well.
Yeah,
at the same time, which will be good. Okay, I'd like a proposal that the content is agreed. Councillor Dolman, seconder. Sam Ellenson. Councillors in favour? Teachers in favour? Faith representatives in favour? Unanimous. Okay. I've got to confess to an oversight here, folks. My apologies. But I skipped an item under 5, which is a bit remiss of me considering we've got so many new members of SACRE. And I had raised the issue on a previous occasion about training for SACRE members. And I asked Phil to inquire whether it would be possible for Blasica to produce a video which could be accessed by new members as part of their training. Some of you know that I used to be chair of the U3A, and we developed that as a module there. And it was very well received when we got new members. You've got training, they look at it, and there's a chance built into it are all the questions that you would normally ask. That apparently is not possible, but we have made some progress though, haven't we, Phil? So perhaps you could share that.
Interestingly, at the top of the newsletter, one of the links there is a handbook for SACRE members in Wales. There was an very old PDF document knocking around that had the responsibility of SACRE members, the different committees that sit on SACRE, and it is quite a lot to get your head around when you're a new member. And I know we've got some new councillors on SACRE today. So what I thought, or what Roger and I had thought, was that we do a training session in the autumn term and actually have a module around looking at what SACRE is, our responsibility, why we're here and what we're going to do. That will really look at the various headings from the SACRE members' WASACRE handbook. We will look at the headings there and just find out what that means for us and what we would do to make sure that we're doing and keeping up our responsibility within Conwy SACRE.
So particularly ask new members for comment there, whether they would find that helpful. Is that...
Yes, Chair, and I just wonder how much information about SACRE is there on the Conwy website? Is there any information on the Conwy website?
Interesting, yeah.
Because I think that's an omission. Because if you want your newsletter portrayed, it should be on the Conwy Council's website. If not the newsletter, a link.
Yeah, I think.
You know?
Yeah.
I think there's many steps how we can move forward as an organisation or a group.
Yeah, thanks for that suggestion, Frank. Can we follow that up, Sally? Yeah, we'll do that. Okay. So, and also, if in advance of that meeting, we need to get out to new members, Phil, the handbook.
Yeah, you have a link to it on the newsletter, but we can send it out as a separate link to all members before that autumn term meeting.
Do we send it? I mean, do we send it to all members or just to new members?
Send it to all members.
We'll send it out to all members, so we're completely covered. Yeah, great. Okay, thanks very much for that. Okay, move on to item 10, communication to schools. Those of you who've been here, 4 members of the committee, will know that I've been very keen on the Agored qualification, which is outlined on the back of the news sheet there. I'm particularly been keen on it because it seems to me that at Key Stage 4, the curriculum is very academic in its nature, as produced by the examination board in Wales, unlike in many of the boards in England. And that being the case, it didn't actually suit the learning methods adopted mainly used by the bottom half of the ability range. And those are much more practical in their understanding and so forth. It's something that we introduced as a pioneer school in my own school many years ago in the 90s. It was very successful, and it ensured that ORE was taken up by the whole of the ability range. In that spirit, Agored has actually been founded. Libby Jones at Wrexham has been developing that, and I would really like to push it with our secondary head teachers, because they've been adopting what? They have gone for another alternative, haven't they? Which is,
there is a, I don't know the name of it now, but there is a skills-based.
Yeah.
I think they call it ethics and morality, or ethics.
Yeah. This is much more geared into, I think, to what's really required in the curriculum, and I think it'd be good for us to actually push it with our schools. So the proposal is, I'd be very happy, along, hopefully with Larry's support, to get a letter out to secondary head teachers saying something, doesn't have to be long, something very clear like this, about the availability of this and its advantages, and whether asking their heads of departments to actually consider adopting them as appropriate. So that's my proposal. Okay, any questions? Okay, could I have a proposal then, please? Thanks, Colette. Seconder? Frank? Okay. All those in favour? Teachers? Faith representatives? Councillors? Okay. We have to do it that way, Frank. It'd be easy to do it everybody at once. Okay. We have put I don't know whether the new members have had a chance to look at it, but we produced a Conwy Sacre management plan. So a bit of history here. There was a great feeling, myself in particular, that we ought to have a more strategic view of how we operated, so that there were clear lines of communication, and also ensuring that what was proposed here actually was put into action. And so we produced an overall, I produced a 32-page paper. Phil, with suggestion of Lowry, turned that into quite a detailed management plan with timescales. We are working to that now. That is a document that we are actually working to. The timescales have had to be slightly more flexible because of the impact of COVID and what's going on in the schools. But nevertheless, all our strategic aims are in that management plan. And I would therefore encourage new members to actually have a clear look at that. And we were discussing as well last meeting how to promote that plan directly with the schools, so that they also are aware that of the role of Sacre, highlighting that again. I'm not sure that, you know, how well we are known in the schools, but this would, I think, certainly, I remember Carl Lawson saying at the last meeting of the conference that it would really, really be appreciated, and it would send out a message as well about the support that this body is trying to give teachers in the field, which is basically what we're about, essentially, in many ways. So any suggestions about how, Phil, I'll go to you first, how we promote this?
Yeah, it comes under the agenda item about communication to schools. So sending a letter to schools directly with the management plan would be obviously quite appropriate. There are a couple of concerns about that. One is sort of translation, because it's quite a flexible document. So every time we audit it, there is commentary that's included. So whether we create a basic version with our timelines, suggested timelines, and make it available electronically in both languages, so at least schools have an idea of what we're doing. There isn't a problem about them seeing an updated, a live version, but every time it's updated, it will need to go through the translation process to be made available bilingually for Conwy's policy. So that's the issue, I suppose. Do we create almost like an executive summary type document with these are our aims, this is what we're going to do, and turn it into quite a useful document, or do we sort of warts and all type thing, this is it in its entirety, but the issues around that would be sort of translation and it being kept up to date on a regular basis? So I suppose there's two options. One, we do a friendly version that this is our aims and objectives and this is how we're going to go about it. On the other hand, we go, this is the management plan in its entirety with the summary and everything. So there's two options, I suppose.
Just to clarify on that, if we produce the user-friendly version, would you be prepared to actually do that?
Yeah, because it'll just be based on what we've already got. It'll be the headings, yeah, in a nice way.
Okay, so we've got two proposals there. It goes out to schools in one of two formats.
I would propose to go for the second option. Yeah, a simple reason: people don't like long documents. They don't read them to the end. And an abbreviated document hitting all the bullet points is well made. Thank you, Chair. I propose we take the second option.
Okay, I think that might be popular. Just give me, before I take a vote, if that would be a popular idea, can you put your hands up? Yes, mass support that. Okay, so do we ask the heads in doing that, Phil, to actually particularly pass it through to heads of humanities? Yeah. Okay, we'll do that. Okay, friendly version out to schools. That's the proposal. Those in favour, councillors, please. Oh, seconders, sorry. Thanks, Frank. You're seconding it. Frank's proposed it. Sorry, seconded. This Councillor Dolman. Right. Okay. Councillors in favour. Teachers. Faith reps. Unanimous. Great. Okay. Right. You're going to give us an update on professional development. So.
Yeah, the agenda item 11, I've already mentioned the first bullet point there in terms of the professional learning from Welsh Government. The training related to the Agreed Syllabus Conference, our video, we videoed the Agreed Syllabus Conference and a training session prior to that. Again, I'm mentioning the newsletter quite a lot, but there's a link on the newsletter that takes you through to a video that explains the guidance and how it can be adopted as an agreed syllabus. So I would encourage people to watch that. And again, that has been made available for schools. The third bullet point is about the F-tray. Now, I am a representative on the European Forum for Teachers of Religious Education. It's a great opportunity to have a conversation with religious education teachers from right across Europe. And just for new members, I've mentioned this a few times in this particular slot, but RE is taught very differently in different countries. And I just think that you think everything is taught in the way that you receive it or the way that you teach it. And actually, when you go to even countries like Germany, where actually, I would have expected RE to be delivered in a very similar, pluralistic, open way that we would receive RE here. And it's very much a church-orientated curriculum. And actually, right across Europe, the church has got a great invested sort of opportunity to provide RE, very much in the same way that church schools would have control over their RVE. Across Europe, the various Christian denominations across Europe have got a big interest in RVE. I know the Scandinavian countries have been suggested as an RE that's delivered very similarly to the way that it's delivered in the UK. Even in sort of Finland, it's the Reformed Church that have got huge advisory staff, and they create the curriculum, and people opt out of that for a general RE. So very, very different, but very interesting. There is some good resources on the F-tray website if you want to have a look around using narrative and story in education. And I think because we are going to a curriculum that we're talking about our locality in Conwy, actually developing our story and the school's story is something it's well worth having a look at regarding our story in RE, and those training videos are available from the F-tray website. And then finally, Estin and RVE, WASAC are currently meeting with WASAC with Estin about what the formal monitoring of RVE would look like, and whether inspectors need training on what RVE might look like within the new curriculum. So going back to Frank's question really about the monitoring side of things. Interestingly, though, they are inspecting on a 3-year basis. They are trying to get through the backlog of schools that haven't been inspected due to COVID. And then the intention is that they're going to inspect all schools on a 3-year rolling basis. And they'll be in schools more often and supporting in that respect.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Any questions on that? I was actually going to raise the question of whether there are any other professional development issues that need to be addressed, but what we've effectively done at this meeting is agreed that's part of the remit actually of the new teacher network. So that will be ongoing and coming from the bottom upwards in the future. Okay, there was a national meeting of WASAC. I'll mention one item, and maybe Colette and Phil, who were both at the meeting, might want to add other things. But the thing that interests me, that there had been a meeting with Welsh Government on RVE, which in fact the chair said had been incredibly positive. They've been massively encouraged by it. And the RVE guidance on Hub, there have been questions about the legal section. There's a summary there, again, user-friendly bit, suggestions for amendments. WASAC made a number of suggestions about draft changes and submitted to the minister, and that's been agreed. So they were very pleased about that. They'd asked for clarification early years in RVE, particularly the fact that it needs to be pluralistic from the very, very beginning. That's been accepted as well. The WASAC had actually recommended a standard letter to schools and parents from the government on RVE. The government didn't like that as an idea, but of course they felt it was an ongoing process, and therefore there will be a first communication now going out, which will be reinforced in September. So that was also very encouraging. Without regard to OVE resources, in the context of the fact this is a bottom-up curriculum, so that's always been an issue. We don't impose stuff from the top, but the government is going to provide a guidance pack. So that's another step forward in that direction. And apparently it's an issue that we have been meaning to bring on the agenda for ages, which is IT, haven't we? Just never had time for it. But there are plans for IT education in relationship to the new curriculum. Kevin Palmer, I think, is actually leading on that. And with regards to Circular 1094, which has actually controlled virtually all our activities in respect to this, the government says that OVE is no longer relevant for OVE. However, importantly, it's still relevant for collective worship. And they've clarified on that particular point. So that was my take on what I thought for me was the most important stuff. Colette, anything to add?
No, I think you covered that. I think the 1094 was really important because I would say that maybe schools need a bit more clarification on that, in that it, you know, therefore collective worship stays as it is. And therefore, I would imagine, I'm right in thinking, that parents can still withdraw from collective worship, albeit they can't from RBE.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm glad you highlighted that as well, Colette. Thank you, Phil.
It's worth minuting this because if schools and teachers do get access to this, there are some resources from an organisation called DARPL about anti-racist resources. So there's a website, DARPLE. If you type that in, there's some support and training, professional learning for school teachers around how to support anti-racist teaching in schools. And then also the Methodist church is creating a pack around anti-racist resources as well, and there's an organisation in Wales that will hopefully be translating that material and making it available in Welsh. So, and they're going to adapt it. I think they're adapting the English resources for Wales, and then those Welsh resources will be available in English and in Welsh. So that's definitely worth mentioning.
Thanks for that, Phil. Yeah, could you, given all that we said at the very beginning of the meeting about that as a particular issue, do you think you could highlight that with the education improvement team at your next meeting, if you would, and let us know how you get on with that?
Yeah,
because that would be a step forward in relationship to that. Okay, right. Get to the end. Date of our next meeting. Have you any proposals, Sally?
Yeah, if you suggest when you want it, I'll have to have a look at our committee calendar and I'll get back to you.
When's half term?
Week commencing 31st.
31st of
October.
31st of October. Do you want just before half term?
yes, please.
So if we go for the week before half term, would it be? I'd really like. Laura's made a terrific contribution since she's been here. It'd be really good to have a date that she's available. So, so can we check that out and then circulate members? In principle, is that the week before half term, before the week beginning the 24th? Is that in general a good idea? Yeah. Yeah, get lots of hands up there. Yeah, good. Okay. So if we could check out with Larry. Yeah, that would be really, really good. Well, thank you very much, all of you, for attending. It's been a lot of stuff on the agenda this time as well. I'd particularly like to thank the new members for their contribution as well. It's just it's been much more lively than it's been in the past, so that's really good. Yeah. So look forward to seeing you next time, and thanks again for attending, all of you. Take care. God bless.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thank you all. Bye.
Ta-ra.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.